Before we begin this podcast, please be advised that the following episode contains language that some listeners may find offensive and inappropriate. The opinions expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not reflect the views of the podcast producers. Listener discretion is advised.
This week on Voices of a Killer, we talk to Kansas City native Charles Higginbotham. Over the summer break of '93, Charles joined the ranks of teenage killers when he committed a calculated first-degree murder. Now behind bars, serving life without parole, 49-year-old Charles reflects on the day that sealed his fate. This is a story of two troubled youths and childhood friends who did everything together, even execute a murder. In this episode, we'll discuss the ethics of sentencing an 18-year-old to life without parole, and we'll bring to light some dark secrets at the heart of this case that Charles has kept locked away for all these years. 3 decades behind bars have shaped Charles, and as he expresses his remorse for the crime, we find out whether he is still the same person that once took a life. So join us as we dig into the mind of this former teenage killer on this episode of Voices of a Killer.
So I want to ask you, did you grow up in Missouri?
Yes, I did. I grew up all around the Kansas City area. I was in foster homes.
Oh, how'd you get in foster homes?
My mom was around either 13 or 14 when she had me, my biological mother.
Wow.
And she was, I guess, for all purposes, an addict. She was I want to say,
unfit.
I'm not sure. And so I lived with her for 4 years, though, with her and her mom, my grandmother, who she was a violent, abusive drunk.
So you grew up in Missouri and you were a foster kid. What age were you whenever you went into foster care?
Yeah, I went through foster care, bounced all around the Kansas City area from the ages of 4 to 7. And then at 7, the Higginbothams, Charles and Joanne, took me in.
And that's where you got your last name and everything. How would you describe your relationship with your parents? Was it a good relationship or was it a bad relationship? Or was it just kind of, what was it?
With my adopted parents,
I
had a pretty good really good relationship with my adopted father and pretty shaky with my adopted mother.
Why do you think it was shaky with her?
They had a biological kid, my sister, not long after I was adopted, and it just
kind of threw everything off.
Yeah.
Did they adopt because they thought they couldn't have a child and then they did?
Right. She'd had
wow.
miscarriages, and they thought they couldn't have a kid, and that was all she wanted.
Wow.
After.
So then they went and adopted because they kept having miscarriages, and then all of a sudden they got pregnant. So now that child is kind of above you, you thought?
Right.
Do you feel like that had an effect on you from then on, where that child came in, that was their blood, and you were kind of like the second-hand thought?
Yeah, absolutely. Once she was born, it was like my adopted mother and I just never talked again. We never had a relationship again because she had her own kid that she always wanted.
I could see where that right there actually makes an impact on the rest of your life, where you come in, you have stress in your life as a child, you're in foster care, which is definitely not, normal, natural. Then you get into the foster parents and then they have a child and you're kind of like second in line. What age were you when that happened?
Either 7 or 8 when I was adopted, but I was 8 when my sister was born.
Oh, so right after. Did you feel like when you started getting into your younger adulthood that you started to kind of drift from them?
Yeah. I mean, I just in my adolescence, my teenage years, my adopted parents were kind of fighting and starting to split up.
Yeah.
And when they did, everything became about who would have my sister with them, and neither one of them ever asked which one I was going with.
Oh, okay, I got you. What do you think they split up for?
I don't know, honestly. Really, that I don't know. I mean, teenagers are self-absorbed. I really don't know.
Charles Higginbotham started out life without a fixed place to call home. He tells me he just turned 4 when his mother, a teenager addicted to heroin, lost custody of her son to the state. Stripped from her care, Charles was then thrust into the pipeline of child welfare services, bouncing between foster parents and strange new homes across the breadth of Kansas City. Notoriously, foster care in the United States is a deeply broken system. Understaffed and underfunded, it sees kids falling through the cracks and ending up in placements that are negligent or downright abusive. So everyone thought it was a stroke of luck when Charles, at 7 years old, was scooped out of foster care and formally adopted by a couple from the satellite city of Independence. The Higginbothams were a married couple who'd been unable to conceive a child for many years. Adopting Charles seemed like a perfect fit. The boy would finally get a stable roof over his head, and they'd get the missing piece to their family. However, Charles tells me the adoption didn't unfold as his parents had hoped. Although fond of his adopted father, Charles's relationship with his mother was strained as the young boy rejected her for taking the place of his birth mother. That only worsened with the unexpected arrival of the couple's biological daughter. From that moment on, his parents' attention shifted away from him, and Charles felt sidelined, a second-class resident in their home. Battling feelings of rejection, and with his parents occupied with the child they'd always wanted, Charles was left to his own destructive devices.
So you got into trouble when you were 18 years old, which is basically months or days from being what's considered a child, still today in 2024. So describe who you were when you were 17 years old.
When I was 17, I was an Eagle Scout. I was an honor student. I was in speech and debate, played football in high school, played a number of other sports.
Did you graduate from high school?
Yeah, I graduated from Fort Osage High School in 1993.
So at 17, in addition to being, the Eagle Scout and all the good stuff, did you also do drugs?
Yes, I've off and on from probably about 14 or so, I would be drinking or smoking weed or some of that. I tried acid and mushrooms a few times, and then by 17, I was doing meth and cocaine too.
How'd you get into that at such a young age?
When my parents split up, like when I was about 15, I had no curfew or anything anymore. Neither one of them worried about me, so I started staying out later and meeting worse and worse people.
Yeah. So you just your parents were at their own devices and kind of left you at the wayside. Yeah. So, yeah. So whenever you graduate high school, were you 17 or 18 when you graduated?
I turned 18 in April of 1993. I graduated high school in May and murdered a man on July 2nd.
So you graduated in May and murdered somebody on July 2nd?
Yep.
So what was graduation like?
By that time, I was high quite a bit.
Were you high at graduation?
Yes. I was probably high every day by that time, my senior year, almost.
Really got deep into it?
Yeah.
Were you in this mindset that you were kind of not just a drug user, but you were like a seller and you were kind of like gangster, like taking on a different persona?
Not really. I mean, I was pretty much just a drug user. I didn't really sell anything or anything like that. I worked odd jobs I worked at Sonic and fast food. I worked at McDonald's. Yeah, I didn't think of myself as, I was just lost.
What kind of people were you around most of the time? Were they people that were just doing drugs too and young, or were they people that were doing serious crimes and violent, or what?
It's a combination. I've had a few different groups of friends. Some of my younger friends were off into the drugs with me. My best friend is my fall partner. He's here in prison with me. He lived at my house at that time.
This is your co-defendant?
Yes.
Kenneth Gilbert?
Yep, that's him.
Yeah. Did y'all graduate together?
He got kicked out of school. He actually didn't graduate.
Does he know you're doing this interview?
I don't know for sure because I'm in the ICC program, so that I am.
When did y'all meet?
When did we meet?
Yeah.
In the fifth grade.
Fifth grade.
To Independence.
So y'all had a bond from childhood all the way up to high school?
All the way till now. We still have a bond.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And he's your co-defendant, so did y'all do hard drugs together?
Yes.
It's crazy is 18 years old. We look at that as the age that you become adult. You can go to the military, you can buy cigarettes, and some places not. But 18 to me is like I was still just a child. I didn't know anything. I can barely remember back then. I'm 45 now, but 18 just felt like that was a different person that I was. Do you feel that way? That was a completely different human being?
Absolutely.
I think most people would agree.
Yeah, the hardest thing about that is that I want to think of myself as intelligent, that I was smart.
Sure.
I was socially not smart. I was not emotionally smart either. And I made horrible, horrible decisions. I'm responsible for the rest of my life, but I was responsible for taking a life.
Looking back at that 17-year-old boy, Charles sees a kid who lost his way and ended up down a disastrous path. At the time, Charles was living on the edge of two different worlds. To all outward appearances, Charles was a golden kid. He was an honor roll student, Eagle Scout, football athlete, and high school debater who seemed on track to a bright and promising future. But peel back that shiny exterior and you'd find a much darker side to Charles. Lacking supervision from his parents, Charles had fallen in with the wrong crowd and took to staying out late and experimenting with hard drugs. By his senior year, Charles was getting high every day and increasingly indifferent to his schoolwork. Despite his record of extracurricular and academic success, he was teetering on the brink of self-destruction, putting that once bright future at risk. One of Charles's closest friends at the time was a boy called Kenneth Gilbert, also known as Kenny. After Kenny had moved to Independence in the 5th grade, the two had become as thick as thieves. Back in 1993, Kenny had even taken up residence in Charles's home. As far as Charles sees it, he took on the role of the leader in their friendship, and Kenny followed closely behind on all their pursuits, even if it sometimes led him into trouble. In fact, cut ahead just a few months after high school graduation, and Kenny would follow Charles into an act that changed their lives irreversibly. Over the summer break of 1993, he and Kenny committed a crime that would mark the end of their youth and the beginning of a life behind bars.
So you're actually in there for killing somebody. Was it over drugs?
Kind of. Yes. A little bit, yes.
Take me back to the week before this murder occurred. What's going on that week before?
Okay, it was in late June. We've graduated from high school. We have the summer off. We've been high, doing drugs off and on for a while now. We don't know if we're going to college this fall. I'm kind of lost. My parents have split up. I don't even know if I'm going to have a house to live in. A lot of things were going on, a lot of turmoil.
What was your relationship to the victim?
Okay, I worked at McDonald's, and my assistant manager at McDonald's was a woman in her 30s that I used to hang out with, started hanging out with and partying with, and it was her brother that I killed.
And what was the relationship between Kenneth and the victim? Same thing?
Yeah, Kenny worked at McDonald's for a little while as well, and Kenny's like a brother to me. He lived with me at my house, and we used to party and socialize at the assistant manager, her house.
Yeah.
Yeah, Stephanie was the assistant manager's name. I don't know if I should even say her name. I feel bad about that.
Just the first name.
Okay. She was the manager, and she had kids. She had a 10-year-old son, and I believe her daughter was like 13, and I used to tutor. That's how I first started coming over to her house from when I was working at McDonald's, is that I used to tutor her son. And then while I was there, I would also tutor her daughter in different classes at school. And then that's how it became like a party place, because we could smoke weed there or whatever when the kids were off and gone to bed, and that type of thing. So it was like a safe, comfortable environment for teenagers to hang out.
So what would make you have beef with the victim?
He had been estranged from his sister for many years.
The one that worked at McDonald's?
Right.
Okay.
They'd seen each other for a long time. And he had just come back. He just came back into her life. And before he did, she told me that he had been away from the family for years and was sent away to a boys' home and then never allowed back into the family for things he did when she was a kid. And that she was scared because he had called and said he wanted to come see her. So she set up a meeting when he came to town to meet her with me there so that she would feel at least safer or have someone around.
Why was she scared of him?
Well, after He showed up in his car with all of his possessions and his dog, and said he needed a place to stay in the Kansas City area for a while. And she was a nice woman, a nice sister, and wanted him to build a relationship back, I guess.
So what became of that?
He stayed there at her place, and at different times, like I said, we would party there. So he would see us there.
Did you ever hang out with the victim? Did he look down on you and kind of and not respect you?
Yeah, he was difficult to read in a number of ways. He liked to drink beer. He drank Heineken all the time. He had been in the military, I think, in Germany. At different times, I socialized with him. So did Kenny. We talked to him, and we got weird vibes from the guy. We kind of learned that his past with his family was really shaky and scary, that he had done something to his family members that they would not talk to him for many years.
In July of '93, Charles's life intersected with two key people. One was Stephanie, the assistant manager who worked at McDonald's. The other was Kevin, Stephanie's mysterious brother, and the eventual murder victim. Stephanie was a 30-something single mom who invited Charles and Kenny into her home on a number of occasions. The summer break after graduation is a time when most teenagers feel apprehensive about entering the next phase of their lives. Undecided about attending college, Charles also felt the uncertainty of his future loom large. But Stephanie's house became a safe refuge over the summer where he and Kenny could hang out, drink, and escape those insurmountable fears about the future. It was around this time that Stephanie's estranged brother, Kevin, entered the picture. Ever since Stephanie could remember, Kevin had been cut out of her life following a long-standing family rift. But now in '93, he had re-emerged out of the blue and appealed to his sister for a place to stay. Stephanie had graciously agreed to take her brother in. Not much was really known about Kevin to Charles. Over their few interactions, he learned that Kevin had a military past and a penchant for Heineken beer. But what had caused Kevin to be so forcibly exiled from his family was unclear, even to Stephanie. The thought that Kevin had done something so bad that it had to be locked in family secrecy set Charles on edge and cast a shadow over Kevin's presence in the home. Soon, Charles would find out that his reservations were well-founded. We'll hear more about that after the break.
Did that make you create animosity towards him when you found out these weird things?
Yeah, and the awkwardness came is that when Kevin, our victim, would get drunk or we'd be around him and high, he would say and do weird things around the kids.
Hey, like sexual stuff, like stuff that's off color?
Off color, like grooming. I mean, I've grown up with a lot of sexual abuse and violence in my life in the foster homes and earlier, so I've seen the grooming patterns, the behaviors and it just, I don't know, I got weird vibes. I got creeped out by him. I thought that. So
let me ask you this, let me stop you. So he's basically giving off this vibe of being kind of weird with the kids. And did that cause you and your co-defendant to start talking about it and like, kind of showing your disapproval?
A little bit, yes, a little bit. We kind of joked things off at the time. We didn't know how to take a guy that was twice our age that had military experience. And I mean, we didn't know what to think of him or what. I mean, the way he was acting was really strange. Yeah.
Did y'all like start saying things like, we need to do something about this?
We talked about, like, should we run him off? Is that a possibility? Could we do that? I mean, we were two teenage kids.
Yeah.
We're going to run this military veteran off.
So obviously you guys wanting to do something about this guy because of his behavior, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Did you what other kind of thoughts did you have besides running him off? Was it to hurt him?
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly those type of things. Like, should we beat this guy up? Would beating him up do anything? Could we beat him up?
Well, how big are you?
I'm 6'4", but I've always been skinny. I'm athletic, but I'm not like a huge
right
guy. I mean, when I came to prison, I was like 6'3", 175, 180, and I'm now 49 years old. I'm 6'4", and maybe 190.
What's Kenny back then, you think? What's his size?
Yeah, he's about the same height, but he was even skinnier. He's heavier now, but yeah, he was skinnier then.
Yeah. And what about the victim? How big a person that was?
Probably 6 feet tall and 250 pounds.
Yeah. So this, I mean, it seemed like what he was talking about, you kind of seemed like it was not that bad, but kind of, it was just off color. But now it's like enough to actually harm the guy. It's almost like, was there something else against this guy, or was just the fact that he was saying what?
Here's what it came down to: is he made weird, like when we would be drinking with him or high, he would make weird references with me only when I was alone with him. And
so it was making you aggravated and kind of feel discomfort.
Well, he offered me money for things, and it just got really weird with him. And like an old guy to me wasn't interesting at all, but the way he was offering money, like he would flash that he had wads of cash.
Yeah.
It was really weird.
Do you do the same thing to Kenny?
I don't think so. No, that Kenny, he didn't at all.
Did you use this in court where this was going on?
No, because I never said anything like that. I was embarrassed because he had made sexual advances to me, and that I wanted to hide that part of my life.
Yeah.
I didn't want anyone. I had the same name as my father, who's a diesel mechanic and a teamster and a Shriner. And I knew if his name appeared with anything like that, I was ashamed.
Yeah.
As the summer wore on, Kevin's behavior became increasingly disturbing. When he was drunk, Kevin would act inappropriately to Stephanie's 10 and 13-year-old kids. This set off alarm bells in Charles's mind, triggering memories of the sexual abuse he'd been exposed to in foster care. Because of that past, Charles was hyper-vigilant and quickly recognized patterns of grooming that he'd seen before. Things took an even darker turn when Kevin began making invasive sexual advances to Charles. At various points, Kevin offered the teenager money for dubious sexual favors and bandied around wads of cash provocatively. But Charles chose to keep his discomfort to himself. He felt an internalized sense of shame about Kevin's approaches and kept those details locked away, even from Kenny. Just like Charles, Kenny was also unnerved by Kevin's disturbing behavior. At first, the boys laughed things off, but those jokes eventually turned to more serious discussions about physically confronting Kevin. At 6 feet tall and 240 pounds, Kevin was a formidable figure with military experience, while Charles and Kenny were two lanky teenagers. Realizing that they had no real chance of overpowering Kevin, the talks went nowhere. All that changed, however, after one incident that made it impossible to ignore Kevin's actions for any longer.
Here's where it came to a final place for me, is that one day while we were over there, like within the week or so before we did this, Chris, the young boy that lived there, the one I was tutoring, that's 10 years old, they lived in a cul-de-sac. And while we were shooting baskets there, I had to quit shooting baskets with him and go to work. And he was saying something about why I need to go to work. And I said, because, we all have to work for money, Chris. I got to go work so I can take care of my car and all that stuff. And then he said, well, Kevin's got a whole bunch of rolls of 20s in his car. You can just have those. He just showed them to me. And so that was the end for me. That freaked me out, why this man who had offered me money for things had shown a 10-year-old rolls of $20 bills. I got tunnel vision. That's all I could think was
defense mode.
Yeah, like this guy has to go. That was all I could think.
After this kid told you this, did you go to work, or did you decide to not go to work and take care of this?
I don't remember those days are such a blur as far as every little detail of what I did, but I remember immediately thinking, I can't leave this guy with the kids ever. And then it was within a day or two, a few days, that the kids were supposed to be taken away. Stephanie was driving the kids to their grandparents' place for, I don't know if the summer or a month of the summer or whatever, but a time period away. And my thought was, we've got to stay there around the kids so they're okay till then. And as soon as she takes the kids away, we got to get rid of Kevin. He can't be there when the kids come back.
Did you have any other animosity towards this guy, or it was just strictly because of his behavior with the kids?
Yeah, it was just that.
Did Kenny have the same outlook as you with this victim?
I don't think so. See, I didn't even talk to Kenny about this. When it came time for us to do this, I told Kenny, "You have to do this for me." I talked Kenny into this.
Do you feel bad about that?
Absolutely.
What did Kenny get? What was his sentence?
Life without parole. We both pled guilty and took life without parole. We both confessed to it after we did it. I mean, we felt horrible. We felt we took another human life.
So you went to Kenny and basically told him, "Hey, I need your help." Did you tell him, "Hey, I need your help, we're killing this guy," or "Hey, I need your help, just I'm going to go do something vague"? Did he just say okay, or he's like, "Man, we can't do something like that"? Or what was his reaction?
Yeah, he definitely didn't just say okay. I practically had to beg him.
Yeah. So did you tell Kenny, "Hey, this is how I want to do it"?
Yeah, pretty much. I told him, "Look, we can, if we kill this guy, he's got a whole bunch of money. We can take his money. We can go party. We can whatever." And
so you're kind of like adding to the benefit of doing this.
Right. Here's what we have to do. Kenny didn't have a lot of friends. I was his best friend, but he had a few friends. He's not it's just that he didn't live with his parents anymore. He lived at my house. He counted on me for everything. And I used that. I manipulated him because I knew he needed me.
Yeah. Do you think that the money involved was a bigger factor than the stuff with the kids?
No, not really. I made it seem like that with Kenny so that Kenny would think it was.
Yeah. You play both sides.
Because I couldn't even share with Kenny things about my sexuality at the time.
So what was your sexuality at the time? Were you confused?
He knows now that even back then that I'd had relationships with guys and girls.
Sure.
He didn't know then. No, he didn't know then. He had no idea.
Yeah.
Bad.
So this guy hit on you, and you said that was a factor, but that's what, you were doing the same thing, right?
Yeah. It wasn't that he hit on me and that was, I just wasn't interested in the guy, but it was the fact that he hit on me and tried to give me money.
Right.
And then when I heard he showed the 10-year-old money,
right,
it freaked me out. All I knew in my mind was that he got sent away from his family when he was young, and his sister doesn't know why.
What would make you feel like that, like still basically, days away from being a child, but how did you feel like this was something that would solve everything and you would just be going on about your life?
Honestly, I didn't. I didn't think anything at all about going on with my life because I didn't know where I was going.
Charles reached his final straw during a game of basketball with Stephanie's 10-year-old son. Out at the end of their dead-end street, the boy casually told Charles that Kevin had shown him rolls of $20 bills stacked in his car. All Charles's fears about Kevin came to a head with this information, and he jumped to the conclusion that Kevin must have singled out this 10-year-old to be his next grooming victim. A fierce protective instinct kicked in. Mind spinning, gears turning, Charles convinced himself that the only way to keep the children safe was to permanently eliminate Kevin from their lives. Over the days that followed, Charles's plan to kill Kevin took shape. Soon, Stephanie would be taking her children away to visit their grandparents, giving Charles the perfect opportunity to strike. It took some persuading, but Charles enlisted Kenny's help with this task. That conversation with Kenny is something Charles deeply regrets today. He acknowledges that he was intentionally exploiting the trust of his best friend, who was heavily reliant on Charles at the time. Essentially, Charles manipulated Kenny into doing the dirty work of a plan he had devised alone. But why did Charles leap to murder? Why not confide about his concerns to Stephanie or notify the police? A few times in our conversation, I pressed Charles about his motive for killing Kevin. Was he really trying to protect the kids from a perceived threat, or is there more to this story than Charles lets on? Charles tells me he was struggling with his sexuality, and Kevin's advances had triggered a deep sense of shame. Could Kevin have threatened to reveal Charles's darkest secret, giving Charles a reason to want him silenced? That's all speculation, and only Charles knows for sure. But it was certainly a complex mix of shame, misguided loyalty, and an impulsive teenage mind that began plotting the date of Kevin's demise. We'll hear the details of Kevin's murder on the next episode of Voices of a Killer. If you want to find out what happens next, right now, you can sign up at patreon.com/voicesofakiller. There you can find bonus content, early access, ad-free listening, and access to our chat community. So go to patreon.com/voicesofakiller to sign up now. Your support is what keeps us passionate about bringing these stories to you. That's a wrap on this episode of Voices of a Killer. A big shout out to Sonic Futures, who handled the production, audio editing, music licensing, and promotion of this podcast. If you want to hear more episodes like this one, make sure to visit our website at voicesofakiller.com. There you can find previous episodes, transcripts, and additional information about the podcast. Lastly, if you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Your feedback helps us improve and reach new listeners. Thank you for your support, and we can't wait to share more stories with you in the future. Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Toby, and we'll see you next time on Voices of a Killer.